Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at the Eonon P4. This is a portable car stereo that has Apple CarPlay as well as Android Auto built into it, and you can connect it to your head unit in various different ways. So firstly, what we'll do is take a look at what we actually get in the package itself. So it does come with a 9.4 inch screen, I believe it is. On the back of that, as you can see, it does have a built-in dash cam. The dash cam can be adjusted as well. On the connection side, you have a USB-C, you have the AV in for the rear camera, you have the TF card slot, and then you have the aux port. The power adapter comes with it, plugs into the actual cigarette lighter, and it does have a USB-C connection on the other end. You do also get the dash mount, as you can see, and the mounting style means that it's very easy to both attach as well as adjust. This has lots of adjustment in it, so depending on whether you want this right down on your dash or slightly lifted, you can achieve both. You do also get the aux cable in the package itself, not too long but not too short either, so it should work. It comes with a trim removal tool. I wish this hadn't been black because it's quite easy to lose. It does also come with a rear camera. I didn't actually install this, but I will show you some samples from it a little later on, and that is the connection. So it's much smaller than the aux cable, so you can't confuse these two. It does also come with a user manual. Hopefully you shouldn't really need this because it is very simple to set up. And the final thing is all of the accessories. So you do get some extra clips to attach and hide the cables. You get some extra sticky pads for both the actual main mount as well as the rear camera mount as well. Here is the full package laid out. So these are all of these sort of accessories that you get with it. You don't need to use all of these. If you want to just use the main head unit, you can do, but all of the extra stuff is included. So this is a complete setup for both front and rear dash cam, as well as giving you Apple CarPlay as well as Android Auto, depending on which one you want to use, as well as just having its own functionalities as well. One point just to clarify is that the screen itself does come with two mounts. The mount that's attached to it in the package is a shallow mount, and that just sticks to your dash, and then you have the option of the windscreen mount that gives you different mounting options if you don't want it attached to the dash itself. Coming on to the actual main unit, and as you can see lit up, it is very nice, very bright, vivid display. It's laid out very easily and very simply, and as I say, I managed to get this fully set up without having to go through the user manual at all, and I'm sure pretty much everybody else out there will be able to do the same as well. Now coming on to the actual setup and installation, I'll do that in the next clip, as well as some video samples from the cameras a little later on as well. Okay, so this portion of the video I'll do indoors because it's just a lot easier for me to set up my camera indoors and film this. I've got a screen recording going, so I'll get the screen recording on the side as well, and I'll just show you a few of the different things. So the first thing I wanted to test was the AirPlay, because I have tested another unit from a different manufacturer and the AirPlay did not work for me. So first thing we'll do is we'll go into AirPlay, and it brings up a little prompt. So if you hit confirm, so that gives you the instructions. So you don't really need me to guide you through this, but I'll show you anyway. So you go into your settings, you go to your Wi-Fi, and then you're looking for this AirPlay, and there we go, it's popped up. So you click on that, and then you put in the password 12345678, and you hit join. Once you've done that and it's connected, you can then go to your control center and hit screen mirroring, and with any luck, there we go. So let's say, for example, you want to test this with IPTV Smarters. Just hit live, and we'll just go to anything.
In Hampshire, where an even bigger challenge faced the Rich brothers and I 7 years ago.
So as you can see, that's working perfectly fine. So if you wanted to load any app on this, it will work. Obviously in vertical sort of orientation, that's way smaller than the actual screen. But once you actually flip it and you go landscape, then it does actually make it worthwhile, because as you can see, depending on the app, it's filling up way more of the actual screen than the phone will be. So in comparison to the actual phone, you can see it's way bigger. Okay, so that's working perfectly fine. So we'll disconnect from mirroring, and what we'll do is we'll come into CarPlay. So essentially what this is asking, if you want to switch from the mirroring into CarPlay, you hit confirm once again, and once again it's giving you the instructions. So this time you want to go to your Bluetooth, and we're looking for Eonon DF50. So there it is at the bottom. Click on that. It's going to bring up a code. You hit pair, and then it asks you about your contacts. You hit allow. It then does a little phone call thing. It only does that the first time it's connecting, and then it says use CarPlay. And there we go, we're connected. Okay, so interestingly, it does actually, in the settings, it asks you whether it's a left-hand drive or a right-hand drive, and I'm guessing that is for this. So it is to ask you where you want your menu. So that is switchable. So on this, obviously, it's showing on the right-hand side, but you can actually switch it. So done with the phone, don't need the phone anymore now. So if we swipe through, yeah, that's pretty smooth. It is, well, I say that it's a little laggy in terms of the frame rate, but the actual responsiveness of the unit seems perfectly fine. So if we click on now playing, as you can see, it goes in perfectly fine. Let's just see if we have any. Yeah, we'll go into radio. Let's try one of the podcasts. As you see, working perfectly fine. So that's loaded up perfectly fine. Now what happens if we turn it off and turn it back on? So let's test the load times. So that's the unit turned off. We'll press the button to turn it on. So imagine you just turn the key in your ignition, it turns the unit on. It's loaded up, and let's see if it automatically goes back in onto CarPlay. There we go. So CarPlay and popped up. So that was only a number of seconds. Now obviously you still have to go in and select whichever apps you're using and load up whatever you want to actually load up. In terms of speed, it's pretty good. The frame rate is a little choppy, but from what I've seen, there seems to be a lower frame rate. So I think this is probably 25 or 30 FPS on the actual screen. And because of that, obviously it is going to be slightly choppy when you're swiping between it, but it seems pretty responsive in terms of how everything works. If you did want to go back to the actual main menu, you just hit this smart screen and that brings you back to this screen, and this is where you can switch between it. If you want to load up your camera, it's this shutter button, and if you did have the rear camera, I believe you can actually switch between them as well. That is how quick and easy it is to set up. Okay, so coming on to the actual installation, as you can see, this is where I'm making use of that windscreen mount, and you can see it's sat right down on my dashboard. The built-in mount does a pretty good job in terms of making it look more stock, but it doesn't get it as low as this particular mount does. Now please bear in mind, I've not done anything with the cables in these clips, so you would normally have the cables much tidier than this. This is just to give you an indication in terms of how low you can actually get it to sit. Now coming on to some of the actual recordings, once again, because I am using that windscreen mount, you can see the mount in the bottom right hand corner. If you are making use of the dash mount, then that would not be the issue, and also the angle will be slightly different as well. So at the moment you can see a little bit of the top of the dash, whereas if you use the dash mount, then the angle of the camera would actually be slightly different. I deliberately sort of sacrificed the video recording in order to get the screen in the best position for where I wanted it, where it reduces glare and you don't have any reflections. With that said, the actual recording that comes out of it is pretty good. I've tested quite a few dash cams recently, and the biggest issue that you have with them is because the camera lens has such a wide angle lens, you end up catching a lot of the inside of the dash, and subsequently you catch a lot of reflections in the video. The one thing I have noticed about all the clips that I've pulled off this camera is that the angle, whilst not as wide, it doesn't capture as much on the inside, and that gives you a much better image of what's going on outside. In some of these clips you'll notice that you're getting very good wide dynamic range. They actually call it WDR, wide dynamic range, so you can actually see the road, you can see the sky, you can see the clouds, and you can capture all of these sort of vehicles and everything that are moving about without anything being too blown out. Obviously there will always be those odd occasions when the sun or the lighting is just in such a way where it is going to end up blowing certain details out, but for the most part, in most of these clips that I've actually pulled, and this is a sort of variety of conditions as well, there wasn't any night driving in the recordings that I tested, and there also wasn't any really sunny days, but this is a combination of overcast as well as a little bit of sun breaking through, and for most part it did a pretty decent job in all of these. Okay, so the final thing is the rear camera. So as you can see, when you actually plug in the rear camera, it automatically selects both on screen. So if I just go back to home, you can see that's on the home screen. So anytime you go into the actual camera, so you can see that is the angle of the standard lens, the built-in 4K camera, and that is the 1080p rear camera lens. So because of where this is going to be mounted, essentially it's going to be upside down. It'll end up being like that. Then you just tighten these two screws on either side, and that actually holds it in whichever position you want. This does require a more permanent installation, and because I do test quite a few different units, I didn't want to go through that inside the car just because I knew I would be taking this back out again because I do have more units coming. But this particular type of camera, I believe, is used with most of these kind of screens. So as you'll see from my channel, I do have some other units that I've been testing, and it's basically the same camera for all of them. This is both internal as well as external, so if you wanted to mount this on your rear windscreen, you could mount it like that and change the angle. Ideally, you want this mounted somewhere on the bumper outside because it will give you a much clearer image. The image is not bad, but obviously compared to the actual 4K camera, it's not going to be as good. This is a 1080p rear camera, and it's just there for additional capture and additional features that it gives you. One final thing is we will just quickly scan through the settings that are built into the actual unit itself. So on the general tab, you have the screensaver, and these are all for the actual unit itself. So you have the screensaver, you have the left and right split, so depending on whether it's left hand drive or right hand drive, that changes where this home bar ends up appearing for the CarPlay side of things. You then have your split screen mode, so you can choose in your CarPlay whether or not to have everything split, so you can actually have the camera on one side, so you've got a constant feed of the camera, or you can take CarPlay or Android Auto full screen and display that instead. You have your brightness setting, which you can set limits to in this section here, and then you can also choose to enable or disable auto mode. You have your assistive touch, which is that little dot that appears once you're actually in CarPlay in order to quickly go home and choose different settings. And then you have the option to clear all your connections if you want to just reset it. On your camera side of things, you have your record resolution. This is either 2K 1080p or 4K 1080p. You have your segment duration, so depending on how long you want each section of the video clip to be, I always just leave it on 3 because I think that's better in terms of recording, having less clips and then capturing the data that you need. You have your collision sensitivity, which I would suggest keeping on low because anything above that and you'll have a lot of automatic recordings just because of how it detects. Even hitting potholes will detect. You can turn your microphone on and off. Obviously in my clips I've disabled the audio in all those clips because it's mainly going to be radio and stuff like that. I didn't have no actual accidents, so there's nothing for it to actually need to record. And you can mirror the rear image as well if you wanted to do that with the rear camera. Final one is your reversing lines. So this is that other feature why you should ideally have this mounted externally, so then you can set up your lines here for where you want it in order to assist you with your parking. And the final tab is your system. So you do have your language selection, you have your sound, which is just the sounds it makes whenever you're clicking on any of the menus. You have your date and time settings, you have your storage info, which it gives you there, so there's plenty of storage still left over from the actual memory card that comes with it. You can format the memory card there. You have a factory reset option. If you're having any issues, you can just factory reset it. And the final one is your firmware version. If there is ever a firmware update, then more than likely you'll probably have to do this via TF card, but it gives you the information there. If you have any issues, you can contact the manufacturers or the seller and they'll be able to assist you. On the left hand side, you've got your home button. You have a quick brightness shortcut. You have your audio section, so this is where you can select the internal speaker. You can switch to Bluetooth audio, so this is where you'd have to pair your head unit with Bluetooth. You have your FM, so you can set a certain frequency and then you just tune into that on your radio and it'll send the audio. Now for me, the FM, well, all the radio on my particular head unit isn't very good. That's why I suggest if you are able to use the aux cord, that is going to give you the best audio out of any of the setups, and it's going to be the most reliable as well. You're not going to have no dropouts, no interference, nothing like that. It's going to give you the cleanest audio as well. So I would suggest using aux, but you do have those other options there as fallback just in case. And worst case scenario, if you wanted to just keep this as a portable setup, you can just leave it on the built-in speaker as well. It does get quite loud. Obviously, you're not going to have no bass or nothing like that, but it is quite loud and loud enough to hear even in driving traffic. So overall, I think this is a fantastic bit of kit. I would be happy to recommend this to anybody that was looking for a Apple CarPlay head unit, and this is just a perfect addition because it can be taken from one car to another without any issues. Quick setup, and if you want that permanent setup, it gives you the options for that as well. I will, as always, have links in the description below, and they are running a deal at the end of May, so once again, check in the description for details on that. I'd really appreciate if you can give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and turn on notifications for any future videos, and if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section below. And until the next one, thanks very much for watching.